Casing the Cover is a bi-monthly podcast where friends and library coworkers, Mary and Jenn, review books, study the publishing industry, and try to unlock the secrets behind every cover. Can you judge a book by its cover? Join Mary and Jenn on the case to find out. Hello and welcome to another episode of Casing the Cover, the book podcast where sometimes I forget to record the intro. My name is Mary, and with me, as always, will be my co-host, Jenn. Today, what you're going to be listening to is an episode we recorded with author Judith Starkston about her new book of Kings and Griffins. I hope you enjoy it. We have author Judith Starkston with us today. Hi, Judith. We are very excited to have you here. Tell us a little bit about your books so we can kind of get an overview for our listeners.
So I write historical fantasy set in the world of the Hittites, who are an empire that pretty much just got lost. You know, it was a vagary of archaeological lack of discovery. And they ruled this big swath of the world at the end of the Bronze Age that was all of what's now Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and they butted up against Egypt. And the time I write about is when Ramses II was Pharaoh, you know, the guy who fought with Moses and let my people go, all of that. So, and they were a kingdom that believed in a ton of magic. So the priestess that's my main character would have practiced all these rites that we would totally call magic. I mean, that's how the scholars write about it when they do, you know, their boring scholarly thing. But as a set of rules and then just let everything happen the way they thought it did, it's really fun.
I feel like you and I are going to bowl Mary over with our geeking out of weird history.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, I think if somebody doesn't like history, they probably would still enjoy my books. But if you have any inclination towards, you know, being sucked in by the history, you know, it's just like this great sandbox to play in as a writer. You know, it's just like the coolest place. When I can't get a good idea, I just go, you know, looking around in the pages, and then there'll be some weird object that they have no idea what it was used for, or there'll have been some usurpation of the throne that totally blows your mind how they did it or pulled it off, or, you know, it's just like, oh, okay, now I know.
I'm sure magic is a good gateway drug into history too.
Oh yeah. Well, and like the Hittite, especially like you mentioned, Judith, they're kind of a blurry space in history. There's a lot of gaps to write into.
Oh yeah. I mean, the first book in my series, we had like the moment these two people met, and we knew that there were accusations of curses. And I don't mean like swearing, but, you know, like full on, I will turn you into something kind of curses. And that's it. That's all the structure we had. We knew he was coming from a war that had been a year ago, and he'd been sort of cleaning up afterwards. And we knew they met. And from there, I got to like build a whole book. And this most recent one that's got Griffins in it, we knew there was a lot of violence, a revolt.
And I do want to talk about your covers and the magic and how you weave that into the cover, as well as the images in the backgrounds that I think are more the historical locations, the ruins of historical locations. I could be totally wrong on this, but I do want to ask how you've woven the things together on the covers.
Okay. So are we looking at my most recent one? Is that of Kings and Griffins?
I'm looking at
all three of them. Okay.
Yeah, I also have all three here.
The first one, Priestess of Ashana, has the what is potentially the most historically accurate background. I have to say none of the backgrounds are actually historically accurate, because if you've ever been to a set of Bronze Age ruins, they are what my children, when they were, you know, in their young teen years, would call ruined ruins. Can we go to some not ruined ruins? I mean, they're just like a meter high at max, and occasional like fragmentary gateways with a bit of sphinx left or something, but they're just a mess. So there's nothing that I mean, all my covers are made up from photographs. I don't do them. There's this incredible artist named Heather, who does them all. So I love her work. Yeah, I am not a visual artist and I couldn't do that, but she's great because I'll say, well, here are photographs of what it sort of looked like, but now can you, so like on this first cover, you notice there's that like lion in the background. That's actually looks exactly like but like reconstructed of a Hittite sculpture. So that's really cool. And I don't know where she found or how she found, or maybe she just took my crazy old photographs and rebuilt them. I don't know, but it was just like, yay, that's cool.
Are they like digital art, or does she do like illustration, or?
She just takes photographs and is like, but I mean, like the torso is one figure, the arms are another, the head is another. There's nothing, and she'll say, no, I can't put, that torso, you can't have an arm going off at that angle. So there's like limits of what you can do, but no, she's pretty amazing with how much room to move. So at one point, like I was like, how to position her arms so that she's, like open to the universe and full of movement and power, even though she's just standing there. And that's what she came up with. And all that fiery magic, that's always the last step. She'll say, so what kind of magic do you want? There'll be a completely non-magic cover. And she'll just say, so what do we want with magic? And I'm like, I don't know, fire. And she throws that in. So it's really fun. Yeah.
I would have never guessed that's how she did it. They're absolutely gorgeous.
The actual torso on Priestess, that woman was originally kind of an S&M figure, like she had whips and stuff. And so her body is like buff, but also like full of kind of, I'm here, whereas a lot of the ones that had classical clothing and stuff just were like limp noodles. And it's like, no, that's not the woman I'm writing. So
I don't think we've talked to anybody else whose covers were built this way. Like it in that much intricacy, because like even Bob, we talked to Bob Frank, and his are amalgamation of photos, but he would like take a photo that he wanted and he would actually take the picture and then do a little bit of editing. This is like, you built a human, you Frankenstein.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm sure the FBI's got me somewhere, oh no, let's take that head. Oh, chop that arm off. No, behead her. Which head? So, but yeah, it was even more fun. The most recent book, the one that's got a griffin on it. I mean, building a human is tricky because, you've got to communicate something with their pose and all that. But there are tons of photographs of humans to build them out of. But there are no photographs of griffins. I mean, there are ancient sculptures, and there's a very cool sculpture in Russia, but they're all sculptures. They're not, like soft furry with glowing wings, and, they don't look real at all. So, and, lions, they're made out of a lion body and an eagle head and big wings. And then there's this problem that a whole lot of the griffins that people have created in the past are these medieval ones that have these little scrawny front bodies that look like more like bird-like, and they have talons. Well, mine are big kitty feline paws. I mean, they stomp people into pancakes with them. They are definitely, they definitely had to be these big, how kind of like a big dog paw or some cat paw, but like powerful, I mean, these things are twice huge. These griffins in my books are much bigger than a human being. I mean, they're just giant, big, very powerful beings. And then getting wings and making them look like they can fly. And, it's just really. So at one point she was trying to hire there are 3D artists that create these like skeleton things that they can manipulate and move. But the woman who was working with those, she was making only the little scrawny talon guy. And it looks terrible. It's like, why are you wasting your time?
We need a real griffin.
So, so she just like, we went through hundreds of lion poses and stuck wings on. I mean, she'll just do these roughs for me, like throw this part and they're not smoothed out at all. And then I'll go, no, until, oh yeah, that one's looking, like, oh yeah, that one's working. She's like, yeah, that's what I was thinking. But we couldn't put him in flight because lions just don't look. I mean, I thought, oh, a leap or something. And your mind knows that's a leap, not flying. And it just doesn't feel right. So it's kind of amazing, that process. It took us much longer for this most recent cover than the others.
I definitely think it's a payoff.
There's kind of a griffin flying in the other one, isn't
there? There is. And notice he's really not nearly as cool. That was just a stock photo one. And he has that, like, he does not look like he's really flying. I mean, he just kind of looks like somebody stuck him up there. And he's small enough that, it's okay. You can get away with it. And I knew going into this second cover that this was going to be, or third cover, actually, it was that this was going to be a problem. And she just stuck at it until she came up with, I really like that guy. I mean, and we put the crown on him, and we were trying to find an Egyptian kind of looking crown, and there wasn't one, so there are compromises that you have to, and his head should really not be white, but to match what's in the book, but if you made him gold, it would disappear, so, the covers don't, the actual descriptions in the books never, I don't know how an artist could match those always, because words and visuals are different, in the same way that a book that's been turned into a movie, if they tried to stay too close, it's usually a terrible movie.
Yeah.
They're like separate. You just have to let go and let your book become what it needs to be as a movie. And I think that's true with covers too.
Yeah. Well, and you have, reader expectation too. What a reader imagines isn't always what the author imagines, isn't always what the artist imagines. So
exactly.
Yeah, it's a beautiful cover. It's absolutely gorgeous. I think she did an amazing job. And it sounds like you guys really had a collaborative process with creating it as well.
We did. And I love her for that. And particularly since she has to tolerate that collaboration from somebody who has no skills in visual arts. So she's just kind of like, well, this is what we could do, okay. And I'm just giving gut reactions. So I appreciate her patience immensely.
What I love about these covers too is there's almost a story of, the griffin is going to be a feature on the third one or at some point, because in the first one, even though it's a lion, it's this statue of a creature, and then you have the creature flying in the background, and then now he's like landed.
And I hadn't thought about that lion in that connection that way, but yeah, I think that's a nice narrative. I like the way the colors kind of shift gradually over them. They're coherent together without being all the same. And so, yeah, no, I think she's done a lot of things. I have no idea what will happen with the fourth one, but I haven't started writing that book yet. So I'm writing novellas that have only griffins in them, no human beings. So I've kind of taking a little, they're novellas, so they're not. And the griffins in my novel communicate telepathically, so there's plenty of dialogue. I use the word sent instead of said, but it's like sort of market, like, guys, remember, they're thinking this.
So you can kind of like project a message further, because I noticed with the griffins, like the conversations could go kind of further distances, almost like a telephone a little bit.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I know Mary didn't read it. I read it, and I felt really bad that it took me this long to read one of your books, because as I'm reading it, I'm geeking out over the Hittite thing. And I'm like, I know what she's referencing. This is great.
Yeah, people who know anything about ancient Near East go, oh, this is great, because yes, you can geek out. I really do work to get the history and the world and all of that super accurately. And I have to say that the archaeologists and the philologists and all those scholarly people working in this area love what I do. Like, I'm buddies, it's okay. They aren't like, no, that's terrible, like, so I'm pleased that I managed to keep the history and the world correct, even while being clearly wildly fantasy. Like, obviously, this is not true.
How much of your writing time generally is spent just doing research?
Well, I spent like more than a decade, mostly just in the research phase for the first book, which was actually a book set in the Trojan War, because the Trojans actually turned out to be part of the Hittite world, which I didn't know when I was in graduate school, because no one was figuring that out. They were still thinking the Greeks were, that the Trojans were basically like Greeks, and it was kind of like Star Trek. And every time they opened their mouth, they could understand each other. And, it's like, no, they were a different culture. It's like, oh, but anyway, so it took me a long time, and it was before Hittites. Now there's some good overview books, academic books that kind of cover the whole world. But back in the day, I was just reading raw archaeological reports and talking to museum curators. Am I reconstructing this accurately? Like, does this make sense? Is this violating something? And they go, oh no, this is good. Well, no, maybe, and then they'd get me back on the right path and stuff. So it was a long time, but now I can just go pull, this article or that article. Well, digitally pull. I keep most stuff now on my laptop, but
plus all of it's in your brain now, right?
Yeah. So, well, my brain is a sieve, so
mine too.
I have to go look, wait, what was it that they made that out of? Or, but in the beginning, oh gosh, everything, like what they're touching, what they're eating, what they're wearing, what they're, how they're getting from point A to point B, all that stuff I had to constantly be researching.
Yeah, I loved the descriptions of like how they would take apart the chariots and how they were like stored away. And I don't want to give away too much of the books, because this is another book that I really want people to read, so I don't want to spoiler it, especially since it's the third book in a series, and I don't want people to be like, oh well, I thought that character died or whatever. I'm like, no, did I talk about that? But yeah, the descriptions that you have of like the tools that they use, the treasures that they have, and like the little figurines and the materials that they use was really interesting, because even though I geek out about it, like in the geographical sense and the political sense, the nitty gritty stuff, I was like, oh yeah, I guess they would have had that, or, they would have used that tool, or they would have known about that. And it just didn't like occur to me until I started reading it, and I'm going, oh.
Yeah, I think it's hard to, I think people view this early in history, it must be really unsophisticated, but this was like a global, in essence, global as in, the entire Mediterranean and eastern part and western, that whole, it was a big international world, and there were very sophisticated courts and running water in the sense of, perpetually running. You didn't have a tap, but, these were cities that were far more civilized than I think most medieval cities were, for example. We moved backwards, I think, not forwards. So certainly the rights of women in this period, it's a patriarchal society for sure, but there's a reason why I can have a main character who's a woman, and she has quite a lot of maneuverability and political power, and I'm not making that up. That's all legally part of the Hittite system.
And you got some ballsy female characters in there. I really like them, and I don't know how many of the characters are all the way through the books, but the sisters are just, they're intense, and the the blindness of the one, which I don't know, is that giving away a major thing?
No. I mean, she's blind from, both sisters are in all 3 books. And yes, she's blind from day one. Well,
okay. I'm
No
like,
spoilers, Jen.
I know, it's like, it's really hard for me. I want to say a thing. And then I'm like, wait, can I say that?
it is totally fine for people to start with Of Kings and Griffins. I particularly that one, I wrote very consciously as, if you want to start here, that's fine, because some people just love like mythical beasts and all of that. And frankly, I think lots of people have said, oh, you're just getting better and better. Like, this is the best book. So, if people just want to jump in there, they don't have to. They're welcome to start at the beginning, but you can also work your way backwards too. So,
yeah, I definitely am going to read the other 2, but I didn't have a problem starting with this one. I picked up right away on the relationships between the characters and who they were, and you even like interlude a little bit of backstory so that if it's important, it's like, you need to know that this happened. And you weave it in there, and it's like, okay, I know where I'm at again. This is fine. It's like watching like the 5th or 6th episode in the series, and you're like, no, but I got it.
that was intentional. Yeah, for sure.
And it's not done in like an info dump kind of way. It's done in a way that's like, okay, we're just going to tell this little story about what happened. And hey, remember when so-and-so did that thing? It's very like just part of the conversation, and we're good.
Well, good. So, I'm glad to hear that, because that is a really hard thing to pull off. Is starting in book 3, somehow making it so that each one works. And, if big publishers like you to do that with series, and I don't have a big publisher, but, it's, that's a good solid way so that people can step in. And I know as a reviewer, I often step into series way late into them and carry on. And I appreciate when I'm not clueless about what's going on. So.
Yeah, and I think it's valuable even if you do read from the beginning, because who knows how much time you've spent between book 1 and book 3 away from this world, and you come back in and you're like, wait, I don't remember who this guy is. And not that your characters have really weird names, but they're not common names for our times.
Right. Right. Well, and if they were true, I take like 2 or 3 syllables out of 14. And that's what I make, like their real names are crazy, long, absurd, and I just shorten them. And some of them I just change completely, because the queen that is the main character historically, her name is Puduhepa. And my agent said to me, I will never take a book with that woman's name to market. So just go somewhere. Well, and then the word Tesha in Hittite is the word for dream. And she, of course, is the queen who has all these divinely inspired dreams. So I just named her Tesha, which is so much prettier in word, and, like, yay, that's a good name. So a lot of them I just hack off beginnings or endings or somewhere.
Well, and like you said, they could have been like a nickname for her. You could still weave that historical play on it.
Right.
Nobody knows.
It's fantasy. So if I have names that aren't quite, that echo enough so you know who we're talking about in real history. I mean, I didn't call Ramses because that just, I think, interrupts like that's too familiar. So I gave him a whole new name, but you know who he is. Like I tell you in the author notes, even if you don't recognize it, but
well, yeah, that was my thing. I'm like, I know who she's talking about, but why did she change his name? And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I get it. But I knew right away. I'm like, it's gotta be Ramses.
Yeah. I mean, these are if you know any Middle Eastern or ancient Near Eastern history, this is very straightforward. I mean, it's not some fantastically obscure thing. It used to be. I mean, when I was a kid, no, that this wasn't in textbooks. I mean, that's how recent the excavation and and sort of translation of all the tablets and all that. It's all pretty recent.
I think it's cool because, again, going back to we grow up learning about the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians, and like your book about the Hittites And the only other author that I've read that wrote about like something a little off from those was there's an author that wrote a whole bunch about Carthage.
Oh yeah, I know who you mean. I'm guessing I know who you mean. I can't. The name is not coming up, but yeah,
it's not coming to me either. So we'll have to like
that's
tag it
just
on somewhere.
Slightly off the map from Rome. I mean, Rome's great enemy in the same way that the Hittites and say the Mycenaeans. Everybody knows about Homer and all of that, but there they were, the much bigger culture, the much more dominant one, and they didn't make it into the script.
Yeah.
That memo didn't arrive.
And just because they were so, like you said, they're such ruined ruins, there's nothing there for us to play with.
There's a bias, I think, because that was the part of the world that was the Ottoman Empire. It was, nothing good could come. I mean, all of those initial archaeologists were so biased against the East, the effeminate East, the whatever. I mean, ever since the Greeks fought the Persians, we've had this idea that there's this line through the middle of East and West, and they should never touch, which is completely not accurate. I mean, the Hittites if you look at the elements in their mythology, and then you look at the mythologies of the Mesopotamians, and they're all mush. They all meet right there in the Hittites. So it's great fun. Jenn and I are being a little single-minded on this.
No, it's fine. It's awesome to hear people talk about what they're passionate about, and I know that influences your writing. So that's what you want to talk about. You go right ahead. I have no problem with it. It's just not my history. All my history knowledge and interest relies in English history in the last 100 years. So
that's where the Griffins are in Mary's world. They're in England.
Yeah, and those are the ones with the little claws. Right. So sorry.
The wimpy Griffins, yes.
They're all the ones on the heraldry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's our big historical question. When did Griffins become wimpy Griffins?
Well, I don't know. There's not an exact moment, I think that when they had them rearing back up on the shields, whatever, that's kind of part of it. But the earliest Griffins all had lion paw. I mean, you look, and some of them didn't actually have wings, interestingly, like at Knossos on Crete. Those ones don't, they're surrounding the throne, and they're clearly lions with eagle heads, but there are no wings involved, which is, you would think, elemental. Clearly that's a mistake, but there you have it. So, so the lion body was pretty solidly part of the narrative, even before the birdie part got quite so dominant. So I don't know.
That's so neat. We could do a whole thing on the evolution of the griffin, going from mostly lion with a bird head, and then a bird head with wings, and then you get to England and you've got mostly bird with the idea of a lion.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to me because they were so associated with sort of thrones and stuff. And to me, the lion is the regal animal, and the eagle is the other one, and so they combined them. But it's interesting that the lion was so solidly there, and not the Hittites used the eagle. Actually, that, the symbol that, doesn't it appear in Nazi is, there's that sort of eagle thing that actually is very similar to the eagles in some of the iconography of the Hittites. So I assume that's where that comes from.
Well, the Nazis steal a lot of stuff, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Right. They took everything.
Yeah.
They had no creativity of their own, man.
Yeah, really. So, and bummer that they stole anything from the Hittites, because then I just ignore that. I never use that iconography because it's oh, no. Got ruined.
Yeah, they ruined everything. But that is interesting. Now my brain is like already down that rabbit hole of like, did it change and why did it change? And
the wings with a sun disk, that's the there's the Hittites had two writing systems. One is the Sumerian cuneiform, the little stick a reed and makes a little triangle, but the other was a hieroglyphic system, not quite different from the Egyptians. And the symbol that meant this is the royal family of the Hittite great king is the wings with a circle in the middle for the sun. And then there's like a little thing that's the queen, and there's a thing that's the king, like they each have a version of that you can see on the hieroglyphics. So there you have it.
That's another thing you did a good job of kind of explaining in the books, because people that don't know that symbolism and iconography, you still can like visualize it. You describe it well enough that it's like, oh, okay, well, I get what they're talking about. I can picture it. It's probably not exactly what it was, but I got the idea. And but of course that's coming from me who does know a lot of it and just needed my brain jogged on it. So maybe, I don't know, we'll make Mary read it.
Yeah, it's on my to be read list. My I don't read list. I'm so bad about reading. I'm a bad librarian.
I like devour books. It's just consume. But and the books I'm working on writing, it's the same thing. It's like I just gotta get it done. But so then you said you were working on another one.
Yeah, novellas with Griffins, and then there will be a fourth one. That's I originally conceived of when my agent said, okay, I'll take 3 books out to market. I ended up not choosing to. I publish it myself because all these editors were like, yeah, we love this, but the market's small. And then they would go on and you just knew this, and we're going to kill this series if we don't, it's like, no one gets to kill my characters. They're mine. I'm giving them all the room they need. So this was originally what will now be 4 books, was originally conceived as 3, just because that was the random number my agent was willing to take out to market. And it really fit much better into 4 books. So that's one of the gracious glories of being your own publishing house. You get to write the books that need to be written the way they are supposed to be written, and not have, you need to cut 30,000 words out of this for some random reason that I just made up. Not, oh, this character arc is too slow, take some stuff out or speed. Yeah, go ahead, chop words like crazy, but give me a good reason. I'm totally on board with chopping words, but only the right words that need to be chopped. So,
and you bring us a different viewpoint too, because I think a lot of the authors we've talked to, what, 3 or 4 authors now, pretty much everyone we talked to has gone straight to self-publish. So you're coming from a world where you had the option to kind of go a more traditional route and it just wasn't a good fit for you. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I have seen so many of my friends be just trashed by their publishing house. And I, to be honest, this is my full-time job, but I don't pay the rent with it, fortunately. So I can give it all of my joy, and it needs to keep giving me that joy. That's the purpose of writing in my life, is to give me joy. So if somebody came in and, smashed around in my sandbox with a big ugly shovel and made it all an unhappy thing, I'd be like, no, I'm sorry. And I don't want somebody having that kind of control. I made this decision in the year of what I call my year of cancer. And, my life was never in danger or anything, but, it's one of those times where you really think about what matters, what is going to, what's the essence of good life. And so I just said, this is it. And I've never regretted it. I've never looked back. So somebody huge wants to come and say, oh, will you do one standalone that does this? I'm like, sure. That'd be great. Tesha, I got her.
Well, and like you said, writing having kind of the guts to write in a world that most people don't know about, and not just being like, I think a bigger publisher would probably say, wouldn't it just be easier to write about Egypt? Wouldn't it just be easier to write about the Greeks?
Oh, yeah. And that's not even what they say anymore. They literally say, you can only write about World War II. That is the only period in historical fiction these days that big publisher, that's, you turn it into World War II.
I was just talking to somebody about this. I don't think it was Mary, but
No, it wasn't
I was
me.
just talking to somebody about this, that like World War II, it's like everything, everywhere. Mary, we did like 2 books about World War II, didn't we?
Yeah, we've done 2, and I think 2. I know. Did you do one? Because one of the ones I did was World War II. The other one I did was Romanov Empire, the other historical fiction I did. Did you do a World War II book?
I might have read one. We haven't talked about it yet.
Oh, okay. We're behind. I mean, I think that's super restrictive because, I mean, when I used to read books, I mostly watch television. But there are so many good like historical fantasies set in so many different weird time periods.
Absolutely.
It's so restrictive to go, you can only do this one era of history. I mean, even like looking at something as popular as steampunk, that's not even limited to like that era, like one era of history.
Yeah, look at someone like Beth Cato, who's, different part of the world and, like, taking steampunk and, giving it a great new twist. Yeah, no, there are some great authors writing World War II books. Like, I don't have any complaint about that, but but really, that's really all that we can, and it's not literally all. There are, other books and other, but that's the primary focus these days. That's
what they're trying to sell is
that's the hot ticket item. Yeah, no, and people, editors just go completely glaze-eyed at the idea of trying to promote a book set in the Hittite world. So, it's like, it'll just have to catch on very slowly. I anticipate someday there'll be some mega buster, show set in the Hittite world, and suddenly everyone will know about me, and I'll go, yeah, I've been sitting here for a long time.
Right. You'll be that overnight success.
Yeah, and people will say, what's it like to be an overnight? And I'll just like fall off my chair laughing. Do you know how many years this is the overnight? That's the longest night.
There's the quotable from Judith. This is the longest night.
So yeah, no, my books, I rewrite and work them, and there's nothing speedy in production for me, but I think they end up, like, I'm pleased with them when I get to the end. It's like, okay, after several, editors read them and say, what were you thinking? And I go back, I don't know, I wasn't thinking, I'll go fix that.
It was a moment, I was swept away.
I just lost track, it's very easy. These are big books.
Well, and there's so many storylines that you're toying with in these books. And what the other great thing, wrapping us back to the cover, all of it is on that cover. Like the story, when you read the story, you don't look at the cover and go, okay, well, we touched on one piece of this. It really does kind of, like, you get the feel of, yes, it was about that city and it was about the Griffins, but it was also about the war between them. And it was, all these things. And it's all nicely packaged.
Yeah, they don't come off as like crowded though. It's like, because you do see, especially, we talk about small press publishing, and sometimes people who do small press or do self-publishing, they end up getting these covers that are like just a bunch of clip art kind of thrown on top of each other, and you can't really tell what the focus is, and it kind of, distracts from what the actual, like, the theme of the book is. And I think yours they tell a story in and of themselves, and I hope, it sounds like you think that they're pretty good representations of what you're putting out there as well.
Yeah. I mean, if they're not, it's my fault. So
and really, like, we talk about how, like, it's all these little piecemeal things. Your covers are the most piecemeal we've ever encountered, and yet they don't look it. They're beautiful.
Yeah. So that's Heather's skill. I mean, it's really, I think it's a level of technical of technical ability that just is not at all common. I know the first book that I published was published by a small press, and I mean, literally at a certain point, they just said, "Oh no, we're done. We've spent the budget." I'm like, "But you just had her put a pot on that's now bigger than a human being, and it's not supposed to be." And she just randomly threw it there because I said, "There's nothing Greek on this cover." And this is a Trojan book, like Trojan War book. It needed to signal history, Greek, something, could we?
I think I'm looking at this cover right now. It's on your image results. Is it Hand of Fire? Is that it?
Yes, but there's a new cover that when I took over the rights to it, and
I see that too.
And then there's the old one, and you can still see the old one. And the sword is kind of on the old one. It was originally a lightsaber. They actually sent me a cover where she's holding a lightsaber in the middle of the Trojan War, and I was like, could we please? And it's still kind of translucent like that. It's like, no, bronzes doesn't work that way.
Oh my God, cover horror story. Oh my God.
Yeah, and it's brown, like really brown.
Oh my gosh. See, okay, I promise we'll wrap up after this, I promise. But we didn't get to talk about font, and you know that font is my thing.
Yes.
And now that I have seen the two different covers, and yet, so the font is pretty basic. It's not a daring font. And I want to say I'm super proud that it is not papyrus font.
Right.
Because
that would just be a cliche, right?
So many times you see these books that are, set in Egypt and that kind of time period. And what font do they use? Papyrus. And you're just like, no, stop. This is much more it's strong. It's got that pillar feel to it. And yet it doesn't steal the show from the rest of the cover.
Yeah.
Which is really nice.
And she does that kind of glimmer on it. So it's kind of shiny,
Yeah.
It has its own kind of depth, 3D depth to it.
Are you looking at the new cover or the old cover, Jen?
I'm looking at the trio for the Kings and Griffins and the Sorcery.
Oh, you're looking at those. Okay, we're not talking about Hand of Fire anymore then. You're looking at the other covers again.
Oh, but Hand of Fire though does have a very it has that almost same really powerful text in the one that I'm looking at.
Then it's probably the new one. Yeah.
You're not looking at the old one then.
No. A new cover for it is also beautiful. It's very pretty.
Yes, and it does the Greek pillars in the background bring you the Greek.
Right. That's because that's the cover that I oversaw with Heather. This was the first cover Heather did for me. And there's a kind of glow around them, but it's not, this is Hand of Fire is fantasy in the sense that Achilles has a goddess as his mother, and she comes out of the sea and, brings him armor, just like in Homer, except it's different in my book. But so they have that sort of divine glow about them because they're semi-divine, but otherwise we didn't have to learn how to do magic swirls,
and no lightsabers.
Yeah, they have accurate swords. My husband and I, when we travel all through this world, and he's my photographer, and I have, after the horror of the first cover and the experience with that, my husband, every time he'd see a really good sword in a museum that was, the right period, not medieval, but mine, he would make tons of pictures. The blades are corroded because they're from archaeological excavations, they're not shiny things, but he's like, I bet somebody can use this. Don't worry.
Oh yeah. It's still good reference material. That's good. That's a good partner to have. He's willing to take all these crazy pictures for you. That's good.
All right. You ladies feel like you're about ready to wrap up?
I think we better, or, we'll all have to get our jammies on and to have a sleepover.
Yeah. And I already have pajamas on. It's a day for me.
Well, Judith, it has been so amazing having you with us. We usually at the end of our pods like to kind of suggest things that we enjoy. When we ever have a guest, we always say, hey, plug some stuff, plug your stuff, plug stuff you're reading or watching that you love, whatever you like. Recommend some things before we wrap up.
All right. Well, there are my 3 books, Priestess of Ishana, Sorcery in Alpara, and Of Kings and Griffins. And my name's Judith Starkston. And if you go to my website, which is just my name.com, so judithstarkston.com, you can sign up for my newsletter, and I give all kinds of free things. And as soon as the first Griffin novella is done, which I've got a sort of a undercover project before that I'm working on at the moment. But when I get it done, it will go first to my newsletter for free. So
awesome.
Good free stuff there. And that's all of my self-plugging. And oh gosh, who have I been reading lately? I've actually been reading a bunch of authors. I don't know if you guys know the contest that Self-Publishing Fantasy Blog Off. So SPFBO, whatever it is. Anyway, and I've been reading all of the people. I entered that contest. I didn't win, Hittites. What can I say? But but I've been reading all these other writers who were also entered it and were finalists, and they're really good, and I'm enjoying them. So there's like Sword of Kagan, and right now I'm reading Shadow of a Dead God. So there are a lot of other self-published books that are really top-notch, and I'm enjoying those.
We will link your website, and if I remember, remind me. I will also link if you want to link that list as well, so that people can see your recommendations as well.
Okay.
All righty. Anything else you want to say, Jen?
Yes, I found the Carthage series. It actually took me like no time at all to find it. So that's what I'm going to recommend. What's funny is it came out in the like mid 90s, and I'm pretty sure that's when I read it. So it's Ross Leckie, Leckie, writes about Hannibal, Scipio, and Carthage are the 3 books. And these covers are not the covers that I saw when I read it. So talk about a cover redesign. Maybe I want to talk about these. But what's interesting is the covers kind of echo, Judith, they echo like your covers.
Oh, really?
Yes, because like the city is in like kind of in the background, as almost like it's coming out of the body of the person. I don't know how well it shows up on the screen, but it's like you see the person, the main character, who are all headless, like romance covers, which is really weird to me because these are not romance novels. But it has that same energy that your book covers do, which is awesome.
Yeah. Are those modern people on them, or are they thinking those are Carthaginians or Romans?
I think they're thinking they're Carthaginian and Romans, but I'm feeling you. Yeah, like
they look very much like this was time, dual timeline or something.
Yeah, this series looks like it might be the victim of a modern recover that's trying to be trendy.
Yeah, maybe trying to misrepresent what's in there, which is such a bad idea. Don't do that, because then you just have an unhappy reader.
You know what we've discovered, Judith, doing this podcast? It happens a lot.
Oh gosh, I know. I mean, even to people who, I know them well, I know what they wanted. And, you've got if you're published by a large press, you have zero say. Yeah. I mean, they tell you have some, but really, they just pat you on the head and say, go away.
Well, see, that's why we like talking to small press and indie publishers, because it's much more interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us, Judith. It was so much fun to have you. I'm sorry it was a little chaotic, but I'm glad we got to get together for this. I think it's about time for us all to sign off. So until next time, thank you again, Judith. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for cracking another case with Mary and Jen. To learn more about Casing the Cover, follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Casing the Cover. To contact us or suggest a book, email casingthecoverpod@gmail.com. New episodes of Casing the Cover release the second and fourth Tuesday on YouTube Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher.